In a small village outside Vienna, where the hills rolled gently and the air carried music from distant church bells, a baby girl was born on a cold winter morning in 1952. This little one, whom her parents named Sophia, came into the world with eyes that would never see. The doctors used big words like congenital blindness, but to her parents, Lucas and Elena, it simply meant their daughter would experience life differently than most. Sophia's father worked as a carpenter, crafting beautiful pieces from wood he selected by running his hands over the grain. Her mother kept their modest two-room apartment filled with the smells of fresh bread and the sounds of old folk songs she hummed while working. They didn't have much, but their home was warm with love. When Sophia was barely able to sit up, her parents noticed something unusual. Whenever music played on their old radio, especially piano music, the baby would turn her head toward the sound, becoming completely still, as if drinking in every note. By the time she was 3, Sophia could hum back melodies after hearing them just once, never missing a note. She has a gift, Elena would tell neighbors, who often looked at the blind child with pity rather than seeing what her parents saw, a little girl bursting with unusual talent. One evening, Sophia's father came home later than usual, his clothes covered in sawdust, his face glowing with excitement. "I have a surprise," he announced, guiding his daughter's small hands to feel the sleeve of his jacket. "Can you guess what I've been doing?" Sophia sniffed the air around him. "You smell like old wood, Papa, not fresh like usual." Lucas laughed. "Smart girl. I've been working on something special after hours. Mr. Bauer from down the street, his sister passed away last month. He asked if I wanted her old piano before he sells the house." Elena gasped. "Lucas, we can't afford I didn't pay with money," Lucas explained. "I'm rebuilding his cabinets and fixing the roof on his shed. 6 weekends of work, and tomorrow the piano comes home." The next day, several men from the village helped carry the upright piano up the narrow stairs to their apartment. It wasn't fancy, the varnish was chipped in places, and 2 keys near the bottom made a slight rattling sound. But when Sophia touched it for the first time, running her fingers along its wooden body and feeling the cool, smooth keys, her face lit up as if she could see the sun. "Can I try it, Papa?" she whispered. Lucas lifted his 6-year-old daughter onto the bench. Sophia's fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before pressing one down. The note rang out clear and true. She pressed another, then another, her face showing pure joy. That evening, after her parents had gone to bed, they heard music coming from the living room. Rushing out, they found Sophia at the piano, playing a simple melody she had heard on the radio earlier that day. Her tiny fingers found the right keys as if she had been playing for years, not hours. "How did you learn to do that?" Elena asked, amazed. Sophia shrugged. "I just remember how it sounds, Mama. Then I find the sounds with my fingers." Word spread quickly through their small community about the blind girl who could play by ear. Neighbors would stop by just to hear Sophia play, often bringing small treats or hand-me-down clothes as thanks for the unexpected beauty she brought to their lives. When Sophia turned 7, her father knew she needed proper lessons to develop her natural talent. He asked around, visiting every music teacher in their part of Vienna. Most turned him away gently. "I'm sorry, but I've never taught a blind student. How would she read music? It's simply not possible. Perhaps she would be better suited to something else." Lucas refused to give up. Finally, he heard about an elderly piano teacher named Mrs. Weber, who lived on the other side of the city. Unlike the others, Mrs. Weber had once worked with a student who lost his sight during the war. The morning they went to meet her, Sophia clutched her father's hand tightly as they navigated the busy streets of Vienna. The tram ride was long, and Sophia counted the stops silently, memorizing the journey. Mrs. Weber lived in an apartment filled with books and the smell of tea. Her hands, when she greeted Sophia, were thin but strong, with long fingers that spoke of decades at the keyboard. "Play something for me," the old woman said, not unkindly. Sophia sat at Mrs. Weber's grand piano, much larger than her own at home, and played a folk song her mother often sang. Then, without pausing, she shifted into a simple Mozart piece she had heard on the radio. When she finished, the room was quiet. Sophia waited, her hands folded in her lap. "Well," Mrs. Weber finally said, "it seems we have work to do." And so began Sophia's formal education in music. Mrs. Weber didn't try to teach her like other students. Instead, she developed unique methods to help Sophia understand music without sight. Music isn't in the eyes, Mrs. Weber would say. It's in the ears, the fingertips, and most importantly, the heart. She created raised patterns Sophia could feel to understand musical structure. She taught her to recognize the mathematical patterns behind classical pieces. Most importantly, she helped Sophia develop her already remarkable memory, teaching her to hold entire compositions in her mind. The lessons weren't cheap. Every week, Lucas would count out the coins for Sophia's lesson and the tram fare, often skipping his midday meal to save money. Some weeks, when carpentry work was slow, Elena would sell her embroidery at the market to make up the difference. Sophia never knew how much her parents sacrificed. She only knew that twice a week she got to spend 2 hours with Mrs. Weber, discovering a world where her blindness didn't matter. As months passed, Mrs. Weber began to realize that her young student had something beyond technical skill. When Sophia played, people felt things: joy, sadness, hope, emotions that musicians twice her age struggled to convey. There's an old saying, Mrs. Weber told Sophia's parents after a lesson. When God closes a door, he opens a window. Sophia's blindness closed one door, but it opened another. She listens differently than those who can see. She feels music in ways others don't. By the time Sophia was 9, she could play pieces meant for much older students. Her small hands stretched to reach difficult chords, and she practiced for hours, lost in a world of sound and touch. One winter evening, as snow fell outside their apartment, Sophia was practicing when there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Herschel, who owned the coffee house down the street. "I've been standing outside for 5 minutes listening," he said after Elena invited him in. "I have a proposition. My regular piano player is ill, and I have customers who come for music with their coffee. Would Sophia be willing to play this Saturday afternoon? I can't pay much, but I'll do it." Sophia called out from the piano bench, her face glowing with excitement. That Saturday became the first of many performances at the coffee house. Customers would sip their drinks in silence while the small blind girl filled the room with Chopin, Bach, and sometimes her own simple compositions. People started coming specifically on days when Sophia played, leaving coins in a small jar by the piano. Sophia's world expanded with each passing year. The piano became her voice, her canvas, her window to a world she couldn't see but could feel deeply. She learned to navigate the coffee house by counting steps, memorizing where tables stood, recognizing regular customers by their perfume or the sound of their laughter. Yet for all her growing confidence at the keyboard, school remained difficult. Other children didn't know how to interact with her, and teachers struggled to adapt lessons for a blind student. Sophia often came home in tears after being left out of games or activities. "Why did God make me blind, Papa?" she asked one evening after a particularly hard day. Lucas sat beside his daughter on the piano bench. "I don't know all of God's reasons, little one, but I think maybe he knew you would hear what others miss. When you play, you show people beauty they might never find on their own." Sophia thought about this, her fingers absently finding chords on the keyboard. "I just wish I could see their faces when I play, to know if they really feel what I feel." "Trust me," her father said softly. "They feel it. Mrs. Weber says you have a rare gift, to make people feel music, not just hear it." As Sophia grew into her teen years, her talent blossomed further. The old upright piano at home began to limit her abilities, but a new instrument was far beyond the family's means. Still, she practiced diligently, squeezing everything she could from the aging keys. Mrs. Weber, now in her 70s, began telling Sophia about music competitions and conservatories. "You have the talent to go further than this village, than my little apartment. You could play in real concert hall someday." Sophia would nod, dreaming of such possibilities while knowing the barriers she faced were higher than most. Yet each time her fingers touched the keys, those barriers seemed to fade away, if only for a little while. In the heart of that small village outside Vienna, the little girl who had never seen a sunrise was teaching others to hear the music in everyday life, the rhythm of raindrops, the melody of market conversations, the harmony of church bells at different distances. Her blindness, which many saw as a tragedy, had become the very thing that shaped her extraordinary gift. And though Sophia couldn't yet know it, her journey was just beginning. The music that flowed through her fingers would someday challenge the prejudices of the classical music world. and touch the hearts of people far beyond her small village. But for now, she was simply a girl who found her voice in 88 keys, proving that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from those who see the world differently. By the time Sophia turned 16, her world had expanded well beyond the small apartment where she grew up. Her talent had outgrown both the old upright piano at home and even what Mrs. Weber could teach her. The elderly piano teacher, whose hands now shook with age, knew it was time for Sophia to seek more advanced instruction. "You need to apply to the Vienna Conservatory," Mrs. Weber told Sophia one afternoon as their lesson ended. "Your talent deserves proper training, the kind I can't give you anymore." Sophia's fingers stilled on the keys. "The conservatory? But they've never had a blind student before." "Then it's time they did," Mrs. Weber said firmly. She reached for Sophia's hand. "Listen to me, child. I've taught piano for over 50 years. I've seen talented students and I've seen gifted ones. But what you have is rare, something beyond gift or talent. You hear music differently. You feel it in ways others don't." That evening, Sophia told her parents about Mrs. Weber's suggestion. Lucas and Elena exchanged worried glances across the dinner table. "The conservatory costs money, Sophia," her father said gently. "More than we have." "Mrs. Weber says there are scholarships," Sophia replied, her face bright with hope. "And she's writing a recommendation letter. She says they can't ignore my playing once they hear it." Elena reached across the table to touch her daughter's hand. "It's not just the money, dear one. The world isn't always kind to people who are different." Sophia nodded. She knew this truth all too well from years of being the only blind child in her school, but something inside her burned brighter than her fear. "I have to try, Mama. Music is the only thing that makes me feel like I belong in this world." The application process was complicated. Forms had to be filled out, recommendations gathered, and an audition piece prepared. Sophia chose Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, a challenging piece that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. Mrs. Weber helped with the paperwork while Sophia practiced until her fingers ached. Some nights she would play until well past midnight, stopping only when her parents gently reminded her that neighbors needed sleep. The day of the audition arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Sophia wore her best dress, a blue one her mother had carefully saved for, and carried a small good luck charm Mrs. Weber had given her. A smooth stone that fit perfectly in her palm. The conservatory building was imposing, with marble floors that echoed every footstep and high ceilings that made even whispers sound grand. Sophia clutched her father's arm as they navigated the unfamiliar space, counting steps under her breath. In the waiting area outside the audition hall, other applicants stared at the blind girl. Sophia could feel their gazes like tiny pinpricks on her skin. "Number 43, Sophia Petrov," a stern voice called. Lucas squeezed his daughter's hand. "Show them who you are," he whispered. Inside the hall, Sophia was led to a grand piano far larger than any she had played before. She took a moment to feel its size, running her hands lightly over the smooth wood. "Miss Petrov," a male voice spoke from somewhere in the room. "The committee is ready when you are." Sophia nodded, took a deep breath, and began to play. For the next 9 minutes, the audition hall disappeared. The judges disappeared. Even her blindness disappeared. There was only Chopin's music flowing through her fingers, telling a story of longing, passion, and quiet determination. A story not unlike her own. When the final notes faded, silence filled the room. Sophia waited, hands folded in her lap. "Thank you, Miss Petrov," the same male voice said eventually. "We'll be in touch within 2 weeks." Those 2 weeks stretched like years. Sophia jumped every time the mail carrier approached their building. When the letter finally arrived, Elena read it aloud, her voice shaking slightly. "We regret to inform you that despite your obvious musical talent, the Vienna Conservatory is not equipped to accommodate students with special needs at this time." The rejection hit Sophia like a physical blow. For days she wouldn't touch the piano, something she hadn't done since she was 6 years old. "It's not fair," Lucas raged one evening. "They didn't reject her playing, they rejected her blindness." Mrs. Weber, when told of the rejection, was equally outraged. "This is shameful," she declared. "The musical world is poorer for their close-mindedness." A week passed before Sophia returned to the piano. When she did, something had changed. Her playing, always beautiful, now carried an edge of determination that hadn't been there before. She played with a new fire, as if each note was a small act of defiance. If they won't teach me, she told her parents, I'll find another way. And she did. Sophia began performing more regularly at local venues, not just the coffee house, but small concerts at the community hall, church events, even private parties for people who had heard of the blind pianist with extraordinary talent. At one such performance, Sophia met an aging violinist named Victor, who had once played with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now in his 70s, arthritis had ended his performing career, but his mind remained sharp and his knowledge vast. Your technique is impressive, he told Sophia after hearing her play. But your interpretation of Bach needs work. You're playing the notes perfectly, but missing some of the architecture of the piece. Most performers would have been offended by such blunt criticism, but Sophia leaned forward eagerly. Would you teach me? Victor became her new mentor, though he insisted he wasn't a proper teacher. 3 times a week, Sophia would visit his small apartment, where they would dissect compositions together. Victor would describe the mathematical structures underlying Bach's work, the cultural context of Mozart's time, the personal torments that shaped Beethoven's later pieces. Music isn't just sound, Victor would say. It's history, mathematics, emotion, and story woven together. When you understand the whole, your interpretation transforms. Under Victor's guidance, Sophia's playing evolved. Critics who heard her at local venues began to take notice. A music reviewer for a small Vienna paper wrote, "The blind pianist Sophia Petrov plays with unusual insight, as if her lack of sight has given her access to the very soul of the music." Yet for all the growing recognition, the major institutions remained closed to her. When she turned 18, Sophia applied to the conservatory again. The rejection came faster this time, the letter shorter. That summer, a visiting pianist from Italy heard Sophia play at a church concert and invited her to participate in a small music festival in Florence. It would be her first trip outside Austria, her first time performing for a truly international audience. "You should go," Victor urged when Sophia hesitated, worried about traveling so far from home. Musical talent needs room to breathe, to be challenged by new ears and hearts. The trip to Florence changed everything. Away from Vienna, where her reputation as the blind pianist preceded her, people simply judged Sophia on her music. She performed Chopin, Bach, and Schubert for audiences who had no preconceptions about her abilities or limitations. A music professor from Rome, who attended her performance, approached her afterward. "Have you considered studying in Italy? We have several conservatories that would welcome your talent." For the first time, Sophia began to imagine a life beyond the limitations others had placed on her. Perhaps Vienna wasn't the only path forward. When she returned home, Sophia made a decision. She would continue to apply to the Vienna Conservatory each year, not because she expected them to accept her, but because each rejection would remind the institution of what they were missing. Meanwhile, she would build her career her own way. With money saved from performances, Sophia began making recordings of her playing. The technology was expensive, but a sound engineer who had heard her at the coffee house offered to help at a reduced rate. These recordings, copied onto vinyl records with handwritten labels, became calling cards that Sophia sent to music festivals, radio stations, and concert organizers throughout Europe. Responses trickled in slowly. A small radio station in Salzburg featured her recording of Mozart. A chamber music festival in Prague invited her to perform. A music critic for an international journal mentioned her as a rising talent worth watching. Not every response was positive. Some promoters wrote back bluntly that a blind pianist was too much of a liability on stage. Others never replied at all. The classical music world, particularly in post-war Europe, remained deeply traditional and resistant to anything they perceived as different or difficult. But Sophia had learned to turn rejection into fuel. Each no made her practice harder, dig deeper into the music, and perform with even greater passion the next time. Her parents watched with a mixture of pride and worry as their daughter pushed against barriers few had challenged before. "I'm not asking them to lower their standards," Sophia told Victor during one of their sessions. "I'm asking them to judge me by my music, not my eyes." Victor nodded, his arthritic hands resting on his cane. The truly great musicians throughout history have often been outsiders in some way. Perhaps your blindness is not your limitation, but your strength. As Sophia approached her 22nd birthday, she set her sights on a goal that even Victor thought ambitious: the Vienna International Piano Competition, held every 3 years and known for launching the careers of major pianists. Previous winners had gone on to record with prestigious labels and perform with the world's greatest orchestras. They've never had a blind competitor before, Sophia said, her fingers tracing the competition announcement Victor had read to her. No, the old violinist agreed, but perhaps it's time they did. What neither of them knew was that this competition would bring Sophia face to face with Anton Richter, a pianist whose brilliance was matched only by his arrogance and whose actions would set the stage for a musical showdown that would change both their lives forever. The Vienna International Piano Competition was held in a grand concert hall that had hosted the greatest musicians in European history. Built in the late 1800s, its acoustics were legendary. Every note played on its stage seemed to hang in the air just a moment longer than anywhere else. For pianists, performing there was like playing inside a perfect instrument. Sophia had never set foot in this hallowed space before. Now, as she stood in the enormous lobby clutching the acceptance letter that had arrived 3 weeks earlier, she felt both terrified and strangely at home. "Are you sure about this?" her father asked quietly. After all these years, Lucas still worried about his daughter's heart being broken by another rejection. Sophia nodded. Her face turned toward the sounds of other competitors warming up, their fragments of Chopin and Liszt echoing down marble hallways. "I'm sure, Papa. Even if I don't win, they can't say I didn't earn my place here." And she had earned it. The competition's blind audition process, where pianists perform behind a screen with judges hearing only their music, had worked in Sophia's favor. Her recording had been judged solely on its musical merits, with no knowledge of her blindness. She had advanced through the preliminary round alongside 30 other pianists from around the world. Now the real challenge would begin. The screen would be gone, and Sophia would be visible to both judges and audience. The coming week would require 3 separate performances: a Bach prelude and fugue for the first round, a classical sonata for the second, and a major romantic work for the finals, if she got that far. Victor had helped her prepare a program that showcased her unique strengths. "Play to your advantages," he had advised. "Your memory is flawless. Your emotional connection to the music is extraordinary, and you hear harmonic relationships that others miss." Registration was a flurry of paperwork and instructions. The competition coordinator, a brisk woman named Mrs. Hoffman, paused when she realized Sophia was blind. "This is unusual," she said. "We've never had a contestant who couldn't see." "I can see the music," Sophia replied with a small smile. "Just not with my eyes." Mrs. Hoffman seemed uncertain but continued processing Sophia's registration. "You'll be contestant number 17. The draw for performance order happens tomorrow morning. Will you need assistance on stage?" "Only to find the piano," Sophia answered. "After that, I can manage." As they were leaving the registration desk, a commotion near the main entrance caught everyone's attention. A tall man in an expensive coat strode into the lobby, flanked by 2 assistants carrying his bags. People turned to stare, some whispering behind their hands. "Who's that?" Sophia asked, hearing the change in the atmosphere. A young man standing nearby answered, "Anton Richter, the 2-time champion. I can't believe he's competing again." Lucas leaned close to his daughter's ear. "Very handsome man, about 40. Looks like he owns the place." Anton Richter was indeed acting like he owned the place. He bypassed the registration line, going straight to speak with the competition director, who had hurried out to greet him. Their conversation, though quiet, carried an air of importance. "He's also a guest judge this year," someone else whispered. "Unprecedented, but they say he insisted." Sophia frowned. "How can someone be both competitor and judge? Isn't that unfair?" The question hung in the air, unanswered as the crowd dispersed. That evening, in their modest hotel room, Sophia practiced finger exercises on a silent keyboard, while her father read the competition materials aloud. "It says here that Richter will only judge preliminary rounds where he's not performing," Lucas read. "Still seems strange to me." The next morning brought the drawing for performance order. Sophia drew number 29 out of 30, almost last to perform in the first round. As contestants milled about after the drawing, Sophia stood with her father, feeling the energy of the room. Suddenly, the crowd parted and footsteps approached. "So this is our special contestant," a man's voice said, cultured and slightly mocking. "I heard we had a blind pianist this year. How inspiring." Sophia turned toward the voice, recognizing it must be Anton Richter. Before she could respond, he continued, speaking to the people gathered around rather than to her. The competition is becoming quite the charity event, isn't it? Some of us had to earn our place through talent, not sympathy. A heavy silence fell. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. But years of dealing with prejudice had taught her to control her reactions. She turned directly toward Richter's voice. "I look forward to letting my playing speak for itself, Mr. Richter," she said evenly, "just as I'm sure you do." Someone in the crowd stifled a laugh. Richter's response was cold, indeed, though I wonder if the judges will be able to separate your playing from your condition. People tend to lower their standards when faced with disability. He walked away before Sophia could respond. Lucas's hand tightened on his daughter's shoulder, his breathing heavy with anger. "Ignore him, Papa," Sophia said softly. "Men like that fear what they don't understand." But Richter's words had planted a seed of doubt. Would the judges be truly objective? Would they see past her blindness to hear her music? Or worse, would they give her special treatment that she'd never wanted? The first round began the next day. Sophia spent the morning practicing in a small room assigned to her, running through her Bach prelude and fugue until the music lived not just in her fingers, but in her entire body. From the competitors' waiting area, Sophia could hear each performance. Many were technically flawless. These were the best young pianists in Europe, after all. Some played Bach with mathematical precision, others with romantic flourish. Sophia listened intently to each approach, feeling the differences in interpretation. Anton Richter performed just before the lunch break. Even Sophia, who could only hear and not see him, had to admit his Bach was masterful, controlled yet expressive, with a clarity that made each voice in the fugue distinct. As the day wore on, Sophia's turn approached. Contestants returned from their performances with mixed emotions, some elated, others fighting back tears. The competition was ruthless, with only 15 pianists advancing to the second round. Finally, number 29 was called. Lucas guided Sophia to the stage entrance, where Mrs. Hoffman waited to lead her to the piano. "Good luck," her father whispered. Sophia stepped onto the stage, acutely aware of the hushed audience, the vastness of the space, the slightly different temperature of the air under the lights. Mrs. Hoffman guided her to the piano bench, then stepped away. Sophia took a moment to find the keys, placing her hands in position. She closed her unseeing eyes, a habit that helped her concentrate, and began to play Bach's prelude and fugue in G-sharp minor. The piece was notoriously difficult, with intricate fingerwork and complex harmonies. Sophia had chosen it precisely because it showcased her strengths, her perfect pitch, her ability to clarify complicated musical textures, and her flawless memory. As she played, the world once again narrowed to just herself and the music. Each note led naturally to the next, building architectural patterns of sound. The prelude flowed from her fingers like water. The fugue unfolded its mathematical beauty with both precision and warmth. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Sophia stood, bowed in the direction of the sound, and was led off stage. "You were wonderful," Lucas said, embracing her in the wings. "Was Richter watching?" Sophia asked quietly. "Yes, from the judges' table." His face gave nothing away. The results of the first round were announced that evening. Contestants gathered in the main lobby, tension thick in the air. The competition director read the numbers of those advancing. 4, 7, 12, 16. Each number brought either joy or heartbreak. Sophia held her father's hand tightly. 22, 25, 29. Sophia's breath caught. She had advanced. So had Anton Richter, of course. Of the 30 original contestants, 15 remained for the second round. The competition would only get fiercer from here. As the crowd dispersed, Sophia overheard 2 other competitors talking nearby. The blind girl made it through. Surprising. Not really. The judges probably felt they had to include her. Good publicity. Sophia's heart sank. Was that what everyone thought? That she'd advanced because of pity rather than skill? That night she barely slept. The second round would require her to perform Mozart's Sonata in C minor, a piece that demanded both technical precision and delicate expression. As she lay in bed, Sophia ran through the piece in her mind, hearing each note, feeling each phrase. Morning came too soon. At breakfast, Lucas noticed his daughter's exhaustion. You don't have to do this, he said gently. We can go home. You've already proven so much. Sophia shook her head. That's exactly why I can't leave now. If I walk away, people will say I couldn't handle the pressure, that my blindness made me weaker than the others. Since when do you care what people say? Sophia smiled sadly. Since I realized that my performances might open doors for other musicians like me. It's not just about me anymore, Papa. For the second round, Sophia would perform fourth with Richter scheduled immediately after her, a placement that felt deliberate. As she warmed up in a practice room, the door opened unexpectedly. 15 minutes until you're on, Mrs. Hoffman announced. Oh, and Mr. Richter asked me to give you this. She pressed a folded note into Sophia's hand. After Mrs. Hoffman left, Sophia asked her father to read it. Lucas unfolded the paper and fell silent. What does it say, Papa? It says, play well today. The judges are curious to see if your first performance was merely beginner's luck. Some are already calling your advancement a sympathy vote. Sophia's hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them against the keyboard. He's trying to shake my confidence. It's working, Lucas observed. Your hands are shaking. Sophia took a deep breath. Not anymore. She placed her fingers on the keys and played a perfect C minor scale. Let's go show them what real music sounds like. As she walked toward the stage for her second round performance, Sophia felt a strange calm replacing her earlier anxiety. Richter's attempt to unnerve her had backfired, leaving her with crystal clear focus. Whatever happened next, she would play her truth and let the music speak for itself. Sophia's second performance at the competition was something even veteran music critics struggled to describe afterward. Her Mozart sonata had a quality that went beyond technical precision, a living, breathing quality that made the centuries-old music feel newly created in the moment. As the final notes faded into silence, the audience remained still for several heartbeats before erupting into enthusiastic applause. Sophia rose from the bench and bowed, her face glowing not with pride but with the simple joy of having shared something beautiful. Backstage, her father embraced her. They loved you, he whispered. Did I play well, Papa? Sophia asked quietly. Despite years of performing, she still trusted her father's honest opinion above all others. Better than I've ever heard you play Mozart, Lucas answered, his voice thick with emotion. You found something new in that piece, something I've never heard before. Their celebration was interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat nearby. It was Mrs. Hoffman, the competition coordinator. Miss Petrov, the judges were quite impressed, she said. Her typically businesslike tone softened slightly, particularly your handling of the development section. Before Sophia could respond, another voice cut in. Anton Richter, waiting to take the stage for his own performance. Impressive for someone with her limitations, he said, loud enough for several people to hear. Though I wonder if we're grading on a curve. Mrs. Hoffman's sharp intake of breath suggested even she was shocked by his rudeness. Sophia felt her father tense beside her, ready to defend his daughter. But Sophia placed a gentle hand on his arm. Thank you for your concern about fairness, Mr. Richter, she said calmly. I agree completely. Everyone should be judged by the same standard, the music alone. She turned toward the stage. I believe they're waiting for you. Good luck. Richter said nothing more, but Sophia could feel his anger as he brushed past her toward the stage. His Mozart sonata that followed was technically impeccable, his interpretation traditional and elegant. The audience responded warmly, though Sophia, listening carefully from backstage, thought she detected slightly less enthusiasm than her performance had received. That evening, the results of the second round were announced. Only 7 pianists would advance to the finals. Sophia and her father stood among the remaining contestants, the tension in the room even heavier than before. The finalists, in performance order, will be number 7, Nikolai Baranov, number 12, Elise Lambert, number 16, Anton Richter. Sophia squeezed her father's hand as the names continued. Number 22, Thomas Dvorak, number 25, Lucia Moretti, number 27, Hiroshi Tanaka, and number 29, Sophia Petrov. A wave of relief washed over Sophia. She had made it to the finals, the first blind pianist ever to do so in the competition's history. As the crowd began to disperse, Sophia overheard snippets of conversation around her. Some were complimentary. Her Mozart was revelatory. Others remained skeptical. Wonder if they just wanted the publicity of having her in the finals. For the final round, each pianist would perform a major romantic work of their choice. Sophia had selected Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, a piece known for its technical challenges and emotional depth. It was a bold choice, perhaps too bold, Victor had worried during her preparation. It's a piece that demands everything from a pianist, he had cautioned. Technical mastery, emotional range, physical stamina. Are you certain? Sophia had been certain. Rachmaninoff's music had always spoken to her on a deeply personal level. The composer had written this concerto after recovering from a period of creative depression. It was music about overcoming darkness, about finding one's voice again. Sophia understood that journey intimately. The morning of the finals dawned clear and cool. Sophia woke early, her fingers already moving through passages of Rachmaninoff in her mind. Today the finalists would perform with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra, a rare honor and an additional challenge. Each had been allowed only one brief rehearsal with the orchestra the day before. Sophia's rehearsal had gone smoothly, though the conductor had seemed skeptical at first about her ability to stay synchronized with the orchestra without being able to see his cues. By the end, however, he had been impressed by her acute hearing and sensitivity to the smallest changes in the orchestra's sound. "You listen better than most sighted pianists," he had admitted. Now, as Sophia prepared in her hotel room, there was a knock at the door. Lucas answered to find Mrs. Hoffman standing there looking uncomfortable. "There's been a change to the program," she announced without preamble. "The judges' panel met this morning at Mr. Richter's request. As both a competitor and guest judge, he has suggested modifications." Sophia turned from the silent keyboard where she'd been practicing. "What kind of modifications?" "Each finalist has been assigned a different concerto than the one they prepared," Mrs. Hoffman explained, not meeting Lucas's outraged gaze. "The judges feel this will better test adaptability and musicianship." "That's absurd," Lucas exploded. "The rules stated clearly that performers would play their chosen pieces. Everyone has been preparing for months." "I understand your concern," Mrs. Hoffman said stiffly, "but the competition committee has final say on all matters. Miss Petrov will be playing Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3. Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. Prokofiev's third was notoriously difficult, angular, modernist, with jarring rhythms and harmonies that contrasted sharply with Rachmaninoff's lush romanticism. "This is impossible," Lucas protested. "She hasn't prepared this piece." "The finals are today," Mrs. Hoffman hesitated. The other finalists received the same notice. "Everyone has until their performance time to prepare. Miss Petrov performs last, so she has until this evening." After Mrs. Hoffman left, Lucas paced the small hotel room, furious. "This is Richter's doing. He knows you can't possibly prepare a new concerto in hours. He's trying to force you to withdraw." Sophia sat silently at the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. Her mind was racing through what she knew of Prokofiev's concerto. She had listened to it many times but had never played it. "Papa," she said finally, "I need you to find me a recording of the Prokofiev. And call Victor. Ask if he can bring the score right away." Lucas stopped pacing. "You're not seriously considering going through with this?" Sophia's face set with determination. "If I withdraw, Richter wins. If I play poorly, he also wins. There's only one way through this." Victor arrived an hour later with the score and a grim expression. "This is unconscionable," he said after hearing the situation. "The committee should never have allowed it." For the next several hours, Victor read the score aloud to Sophia, describing each passage in detail while she committed it to memory, her fingers moving over the silent keyboard. They worked through lunch and into the afternoon, stopping only when absolutely necessary. "The second movement has this repeated figure in the left hand," Victor explained. "Like raindrops, but with Prokofiev's characteristic bite." Sophia nodded, absorbing every word, her extraordinary memory and musical intuition working overtime. By late afternoon, she had a rough map of the concerto in her mind. Not enough for a polished performance under normal circumstances, but perhaps enough to survive. Meanwhile, the finals had begun. Through calls to friends attending the concert, Lucas learned that the other finalists were struggling with their reassigned pieces. Two had made significant errors. One had stopped mid-performance to restart a difficult passage. "And Richter?" Sophia asked during a brief break. Lucas's expression darkened. Apparently he was randomly assigned Tchaikovsky's First Concerto, which happens to be his signature piece. The one he's performed dozens of times. The coincidence was too perfect to be chance. Richter had orchestrated the entire change to guarantee his victory and humiliate the other competitors, particularly Sophia, whose blindness made learning a new piece on short notice even more challenging. As evening approached, it was time to leave for the concert hall. Sophia was exhausted from hours of intense concentration, but a strange calm had settled over her. She changed into her performance dress, a deep blue gown her mother had made specially for the finals, and allowed her father to help with her hair. "You don't have to do this," Lucas said one last time. "No one would blame you for withdrawing under these circumstances." Sophia touched her father's face gently, feeling the worry lines around his eyes. "Do you remember what you told me when I was little? About why God might have made me blind, that perhaps he knew you would hear what others miss?" Lucas answered softly. "Tonight I need to hear what even I might have missed before," Sophia said. "I can do this, Papa. Not perfectly, but honestly." At the concert hall, backstage was tense with whispers about the last-minute changes. Several competitors nodded respectfully to Sophia as she arrived, a silent acknowledgement of their shared challenge. The message was clear. Regardless of the results, the finalists now shared a bond forged by Richter's manipulation. One by one, the other pianists performed their reassigned concertos. Some fared better than others, but none could deliver the polished performances they had prepared for months. The audience, sensing something was amiss, responded with supportive but restrained applause. Anton Richter, of course, played magnificently. His Tchaikovsky concerto was confident and dramatic, earning a standing ovation. As he took his bows, his eyes swept the backstage area where Sophia waited, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. Finally, it was Sophia's turn. As she was led to the piano, she could feel the audience's curiosity and the orchestra's skepticism. The conductor leaned close before beginning. "We'll follow you," he whispered, a small act of kindness that nearly broke Sophia's composure. She nodded her thanks, placed her hands on the keyboard, and took a deep breath. For a moment, doubt threatened to overwhelm her. The music in her head seemed to fragment. Too many notes, too little preparation. Then, from somewhere in the back of the hall, she heard her father cough, a sound she would recognize anywhere. It centered her, reminded her of who she was and why she was here. Sophia nodded to the conductor, and the orchestra began the sharp, challenging opening of Prokofiev's Third Piano Concerto. She had seconds before her entrance, seconds to make a final choice. She could attempt to play the concerto as written, risking catastrophic mistakes, or she could do something no classical pianist would ever consider in competition, make the piece her own. Sophia chose the latter. When her hands touched the keys, she played Prokofiev's notes but with a different voice than anyone had heard before, finding the emotion beneath the modernist angles, the humanity within the mechanical precision. Where her memory failed, her musicianship filled the gaps with intuitive understanding of where the music needed to go. The orchestra, initially hesitant, began to follow her interpretation with growing confidence. The conductor, sensing something extraordinary happening, gave himself over to Sophia's vision of the piece. What emerged was Prokofiev transformed, not diluted or simplified, but illuminated from within. It wasn't a note-perfect performance, but it was alive in a way that technical perfection alone could never achieve. As the final movement built toward its climax, Sophia felt something she had never experienced before, a complete unity with the orchestra, the audience, the music itself. She was no longer playing the piano. She was simply allowing the music to exist through her. The final chords resounded through the hall, and then silence. Complete, absolute silence. The silence lasted only moments, but felt eternal. Sophia sat motionless at the piano, hands still resting on the keys, uncertain what the silence meant. Had she failed completely? Had her reimagining of Prokofiev offended the classical music purists? Or had something else entirely happened? Then came a single clap. Another joined it. Suddenly, the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, their cheers echoing off the ornate ceiling. The orchestra members, still seated behind Sophia, began tapping their bows against their music stands, a rare gesture of respect from professional musicians. Sophia stood and bowed, her face flushed with emotion. The applause continued, washing over her in waves. She could hear people calling "Bravo!" and something else, something she couldn't quite make out at first. "What are they saying?" she whispered when the conductor approached to shake her hand. "They're saying Prokofiev as he should be played," he told her, his voice filled with wonder. "And they're right." Backstage, Lucas swept his daughter into a fierce embrace. "I've never been more proud," he said, his voice breaking. "Not just of how you played, but of your courage to play at all." Victor, who had watched from the audience, made his way backstage with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "In 40 years of music, I have never heard anything like it," he said, grasping Sophia's hands. "You didn't just play the notes, you reinvented them while keeping their soul intact." As the judges conferred, the lobby buzzed with excited conversation. Critics huddled in corners, gesturing animatedly. Audience members debated what they had witnessed. Even the other competitors spoke of Sophia's performance with a mixture of awe and professional respect. Only Anton Richter remained apart from the excitement, his face tight with displeasure as he paced near the judges' room. His plan to humiliate Sophia had backfired spectacularly. By forcing her to play a piece she hadn't prepared, he had inadvertently given her the freedom to create something unprecedented. After what seemed like hours, the judges emerged. The audience was called back to their seats and the finalists were brought on stage. Sophia stood among them holding her father's arm, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The head judge approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the jury has reached its decision." He paused, looking at the row of pianists. "This year's competition presented unique challenges. We were asked to evaluate not just technical mastery but adaptability, musicianship, and artistic vision." He cleared his throat. "The third prize goes to Nikolai Baranov." Polite applause followed as the young Russian pianist stepped forward to accept his medal. "The second prize is awarded to Anton Richter." A murmur rippled through the audience. Richter's face darkened as he stepped forward stiffly. For a two-time champion to place second was unexpected. He accepted the silver medal with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And the first prize of the Vienna International Piano Competition goes to..." Sophia held her breath. "Sophia Petrov." The hall erupted once more. Sophia stood frozen in disbelief until Lucas gently nudged her forward. As she accepted the gold medal, the audience's ovation swelled to near-deafening levels. "Miss Petrov," the head judge said, his voice carrying above the noise, "your performance tonight redefined what is possible in interpretation. You took unthinkable circumstances and created a moment none of us will ever forget." Sophia, overwhelmed, could only whisper her thanks as tears streamed down her face. As the ceremony concluded and people began to leave, a reporter approached Sophia. "Miss Petrov, how does it feel to be the first blind pianist to win this competition?" Before she could answer, another voice cut in, Anton Richter's. The audience, still remaining, fell silent, curious about this confrontation. "She didn't win because she's blind," Richter said sharply. Every head turned toward him, expecting another cutting remark. But his next words surprised everyone. "She won despite being blind. She won because tonight she was simply the best pianist on that stage. Better than all of us. Better than me." He turned to face Sophia directly. "I owe you an apology, Miss Petrov. I tried to eliminate you from the competition with an impossible challenge. Instead, you showed all of us what music can be when we stop worrying about the notes on the page and truly hear what's behind them." With that, he walked away, leaving a stunned silence behind him. The aftermath of the competition changed everything for Sophia. Recording offers came from major labels. Concert halls across Europe sent invitations. Critics wrote glowing reviews, analyzing how her unique perspective as a blind musician had allowed her to find new dimensions in familiar works. But the change that mattered most came 3 weeks after the competition, when Sophia received a letter from the Vienna Conservatory, the same institution that had rejected her twice before. They were offering her not a student position, but a guest lectureship to teach a master class in interpretation. "They're not just acknowledging your talent," Victor said when he heard the news. "They're acknowledging their mistake in rejecting you. That's rare in the classical music world." Sophia accepted the offer with one condition, that her class be open to musicians with disabilities. The conservatory agreed, and that autumn, Sophia taught her first class to a group that included not only traditional piano students, but a young man with cerebral palsy who played with his feet and a deaf percussionist who felt rhythms through vibrations. News of Sophia's approach spread, and soon other conservatories began to re-examine their policies regarding students with disabilities. It wasn't an overnight revolution. The classical music establishment moved slowly, but doors that had been firmly shut began to crack open. 4 months after the competition, Sophia received another unexpected letter. It was from Anton Richter, writing from London where he was performing with the Philharmonic. "Dear Miss Petrov," the letter began, "I find myself thinking often of your performance of Prokofiev. It has changed how I approach my own playing. For years I've been praised for my technical precision, but I've begun to realize that precision without soul is merely mechanical reproduction. You played with both that night, finding your own truth within the composer's intentions. I am attempting, in my limited way, to do the same." The letter continued, revealing a different side to the arrogant pianist Sophia had met in Vienna. He wrote of his own struggles, of the pressure to maintain his reputation, of the fear of innovation that had calcified his playing over the years. "Your blindness, which I once saw as your greatest limitation, may in fact be your greatest gift as a musician," he concluded. "You hear what the rest of us, distracted by scores and traditions and expectations, have forgotten how to listen for." Sophia asked her father to help her compose a thoughtful reply. Over the next year, an unlikely correspondence developed between the two pianists, the established virtuoso and the emerging star, each learning from the other's perspective. During this time, Sophia's career flourished. Her first album, a recording of Prokofiev's concertos with the Vienna Symphony, became a surprise bestseller. Classical music publications described her interpretation as revolutionary and essential listening, but Sophia took the most pride in a different achievement: the founding of her Music Without Barriers Foundation, which provided scholarships and specialized training for musicians with disabilities. She used a significant portion of her competition winnings and recording income to establish the foundation, which quickly gained support from prominent musicians, including, somewhat surprisingly, Anton Richter, who donated generously and served on its advisory board. 2 years after the competition, Sophia returned to the same concert hall for a special performance. This time she shared the stage with students from her foundation, young musicians who, like her, had faced barriers but found their own paths through music. As Sophia took her place at the piano that evening, she thought of the journey that had brought her here, from the little girl feeling her way around an old upright piano, to the teenager rejected by the musical establishment, to the woman who had proven that music transcends physical limitations. The hall fell silent as she began to play. She had chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece she had originally prepared for the competition finals but never got to perform. Now, with nothing to prove and no one to impress, she played it simply for the love of the music itself. Her fingers moved across the keys with both technical mastery and profound emotion, drawing from the instrument sounds so rich and nuanced that many in the audience closed their eyes to better hear them, momentarily sharing Sophia's experience of the world, where sound painted more vivid pictures than sight ever could. In the front row sat her father, Lucas, and beside him her mother Elena, who had sewn Sophia's first performance dress all those years ago. Next to them was Mrs. Weber, now in her 80s but still alert, nodding approvingly at her former students playing. Victor sat nearby, his arthritis-gnarled hands conducting gently in his lap, and in a seat toward the back, unannounced and unrecognized by most, sat Anton Richter, the man whose attempt to humiliate Sophia had inadvertently launched her career. He watched with newfound humility as the blind pianist he had once dismissed transformed Rachmaninoff's notes into something transcendent. As the music filled the hall, Sophia felt a sense of completion. Her journey had never really been about proving herself to others or overcoming her blindness. It had been about finding her authentic voice and using it to open doors for others. The last movement of the concerto built toward its powerful conclusion. Sophia's hands danced across the keys with absolute confidence, no longer searching but knowing exactly where to land, just as she had found her place in the world. The final chords resonated through the hall, strong, triumphant, and full of hope. As they faded into silence, Sophia knew that this wasn't an ending but a beginning, not just for her, but for all those who would follow the path she had helped clear. Music, she had always believed, belonged to everyone. Now, because of her courage on that competition stage, a few more people would have the chance to prove it.